Conservative leader Pierre this week ahead of a meeting with Prime Minister Mark Carney criticizing the Liberal government for the cost of living. After the half-hour sit-down, however, a spokesperson for Poilievre described the conversation as a, quote, good meeting. Poilievre also wrote on social media that he offered specific suggestions on how to bring back investment and restated the offer from Conservatives to help in the Canada-US negotiations. Carney, meanwhile, wrote, "We need Parliament to move swiftly to deliver for Canadians and that it's an important time to be working together." So, what might the joint push for collaboration signal and how does it play politically for both parties? Our Sunday strategy session is here to talk about that. Kathleen Monk is a former NDP strategist and Director of Communications to the late Jack Layton. Lisa Raid is a former Conservative Deputy Leader and current Vice Chair and Managing Director of Global Investment Banking at CIBC. And Scott Reid is a CTV News political analyst and former Communications Director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Hi, everybody.
Hey there.
Scott, I'll start with you. How real do you think the spirit of collaboration is right now?
Yeah, not much. I know everybody loves this talk of cooperation and collaboration, and of course, and we did see them working together on the GST rebate. But, you know, the excitement and fanfare that surrounded that meeting, I did not think was matched by the results. And I don't want to be an atheist in church when it comes to this whole brand new era of cooperation and big pivot in Parliament, but I just don't think it's happening. And I don't think it's happening because the readouts from both leaders were about as tepid and mailed in as you could expect. That photo they released of the two of them, they were so far apart. They looked like divorced parents at a wedding. Like, it just, to me, the whole excitement about, well, there's a brand new tone and strategy, I'm not really sure I buy it. They may end up linking up on a couple legislative initiatives, but at the end of the day, Pierre Poilievre wants Mark Carney's job, and Mark Carney wants Pierre Poilievre behind him. So I just don't think we're going to see some reversal of the laws of political gravity.
Well, we know who the cynic is among us. Just kidding, just kidding. Lisa, how real do you think it is? And what are what's the political or strategic incentive for each side to present this to the public?
Well, while both leaders probably were gritting their teeth a little bit, they both know as well that the message that they're sending to Canadians, the non-cynical ones, Scott, but the message they're sending to Canadians is, quite frankly, we're going to work together for you because we know it's important to you. And it is important to Canadians to see their leaders working with one another. And the main reason being is that the threat from the South is real. And it's very concerning, and more we're seeing jobs being lost to the United States and more closures and more announcements, so there's a lot more anxiety about it. So I think it was smart for them to do it. What will they do going forward? I don't know. But if you look through the annals of history, you'll oftentimes see prime ministers talk about the fact that they did work with their leader of the opposition. It may not have been something that was apparent. Jack Layton, Stephen Harper, Tom Mulcair, Stephen Harper, they did work together, and they did, I mean, Tom still says nice things about Stephen Harper in their moments when they were working together, but he would try to rip our throats out on the floor of the House of Commons at the same time. So what you necessarily see outward may not be exactly what's happening inside.
Yeah, it's interesting you raise that example because Tom was actually on our program this week, Kathleen, when we were covering the portrait unveiling, the official portrait unveiling for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, and he actually described like very regular meetings that they would have. That the Prime Minister at the time, like Prime Minister Harper, took it very seriously to apprise him of like everything that was going on. They had tons of dialogue, in that basically they knew they were at each other's throat, and quite effectively, actually, if I remember back to that day, in Parliament, but that it was different behind the scenes. I think during the Poilievre-Trudeau era, it didn't feel like that was going on.
Yeah.
I don't know if it could be characterized the same way. Can things meaningfully change?
I think they can, and I think that Prime Minister Carney, has demonstrated that. He's not just meeting with the opposition leader, Pierre Poilievre. He has met with other opposition parties too, like Don Davies and whatnot. But I mean, even though we're approaching Valentine's Day, I don't think what we saw this past week is a love-in. I don't think that it's actually, a real sense of cooperation yet. It's more political, statesmancraft. It's more political choreography, frankly, and what they want to put forward to the public, because nobody wants to have an election right now. So they can't be seen as obstructionist. And Scott's right, there was some genuine movement on the Conservatives to let that GST bill, put that motion forward to expedite it through Parliament. But I think what we really have to watch for is the Budget Implementation Act. Is that where the cooperation is actually going to break down? Because that's a bill that all parties have resisted, have not helped move through, and that's the bill that, frankly, the government needs to see go through. They don't want that parliamentary paralysis. They want things to be moving through. So there's reasons on all sides for there's more cooperation, including, as you mentioned, Stephen Harper. He was in town this past week. Conservatives saw a former prime minister, a former conservative leader who was more cooperative, who was more conciliatory in tone at times, and I think they saw, Stephen Harper this week, and a lot of conservatives are urging their leader to be more like the former conservative leader in Stephen Harper.
I would say only on the Budget Implementation Act. I get the point, and that's certainly what the Prime Minister has said he stressed in the meetings that have taken place. But that act is like 600. That bill is 600 pages, and not just about the the budget. On the prospect of an election, Scott, when you see what's unfolded over the past few weeks, what is your assessment about the likelihood of one? I think behind the scenes, at least Liberals who were talking more prior to Christmas about there definitely being one sooner rather than later have stopped doing so.
That could mean they're planning one. No, what I really think is, notwithstanding the polls, which we'll see exactly where they settle out, but there appears to be a little bit of a bounce for Mr. Carney and the Liberals coming out of January. I don't think the Liberals are stampeding toward a spring election. I still think they need, given the gravity of the issues that confront us as a country, given the threats of Trump and the economic anxiety that the people feel, I think they would need an explicit trigger. They would need a very firm, clear justification. And I think that all ends up not in the hands, in some ways, of Mark Carney or Pierre Poilievre. I think that's kind of in the hands of Donald Trump. If he were to abrogate the USMCA and say, look, I'm going to start these negotiations by serving 6 months' notice, then I think you might see the Prime Minister justifiably say, you know what, I need to go to the people and get a mandate. I think failing some sort of eruption like that, some sort of enormous move on the part of the Conservatives to block Parliament, which I don't think they're going to be foolish enough to do, I'm not certain there's going to be grounds in the broader political context for an early election call. I still believe there will be an election in 2026, but I don't think one's imminent just because we've seen favorable polls.
Yeah, this week it's interesting also the Liberals announced 2 candidates for by-elections whenever those are called, which also kind of lends itself to the one from the Ontario NDP, for example, and the other one kind of a well-known family physician, Daniel Martin, both of them more on the progressive side of things, Lisa, which kind of lends itself to the idea that if they're planning for by-elections, maybe they're not planning for an imminent election. What do you think the possibility of one is?
I'm surprised Scott said yes to 2026, but not imminent. I think that what it comes down to is in that Budget Implementation Act, if the government takes a very entrenched position and refuses to change anything in there at the call of either the opposition Conservative or the NDP or the Bloc, then we may very well see the House fall. It is in the hands of the Liberals at the end of the day if they would like to take any advice from the opposition parties in terms of that Budget Implementation Act, because that is a confidence motion. So we'll end up seeing how they're going to approach it. I think it's dangerous for the Prime Minister to call an election, but I think it's not as dangerous for the House to fall on a confidence motion because you need a mandate to do certain things in the country.
It feels like no opposition party, though, will imminently force that to be the case. Like, it doesn't seem like
and we saw them literally hiding behind the curtains the last time, and in order so the government wouldn't fall. So I agree. It's more likely that, as Scott said, frankly, that Trump will force Carney's hand. That we've heard Lutnick and others say that the negotiations are pushed to the end of summer. If something breaks down then with CUSMA, with USMCA, does Carney then take that as the reason to go back to the polls in late fall 2026 on the issue of the trade negotiations, on the issue of U.S. versus Canada and what happens there?
Okay, I'll leave it there. Thanks, guys. Appreciate the discussion. Our Sunday strategy session, Kathleen Monk, Lisa Raitt, and Scott Reed.